From the front lines of the military to the front lines of business, this is Military to Management. I'm your host, Eamon. Each episode, we uncover how veterans are translating discipline, leadership, and mission-first values into success in today's corporate world. Hey, Jason, thanks for taking some time to talk to me today about you, your military career, and your transition and what you're doing now. Lots of really great things, and I'm sure a lot of great lessons learned from everything that you've accomplished so far. So let's just jump right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about your military career and what you did?
Yeah, sure. Eamon, I appreciate you reaching out, and I really respect everything you're trying to do. Just from the time in the military and then getting out, I think guys need that support and mentorship, and so always willing to give back. So I was in the Marine Corps for about 11 years, and I started out in 3-2 as a machine gunner, and I ended up moving over to MARSOC, and I spent 7 years there as a Marine Raider.
Amazing. Were there any highlights or things that really stuck out with you in your time in the Marines that have kind of instilled some lessons learned or some traits or anything that has continued to allow you to be successful today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were some combat operations, but the majority of what I did in MARSOC was foreign internal defense, aid, advise, and assist. That's what most of special operations does. Aid, advise, and accompany. And a lot of that I did, I wouldn't say there was any direct operation or one training event that really stood out or shaped me forever. But I would say, just the lifestyle, the level of accountability that all that brings. I joined to make an impact and serve my country and make a difference, like most folks who join do. And I realized I wasn't getting what I thought I would get. Every time I'd go on deployment or go on an operation, whatever it was, I was kind of left thinking this wasn't having the same level of global impact, I thought it would. I was seeking fulfillment out of that, and that's not where I got it. I was actually pleasantly surprised that it was the lifestyle itself, the commitment to serving and doing something greater, but then everything that came with that, the self-fortitude, the resilience to continue going forward, coming back from deployment, resetting, calibrating to civilian life, keeping up with your family and everything else, but then also just all of that self-discipline it takes to really be successful in that environment. It's just a constant learning loop of going to courses, being challenged, and it really does teach you a high level of resilience that you can just do anything. You can jump out of planes, you can dive, you can build bombs, you can really take on anything and come out and be successful.
That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like a ton of great lessons and values instilled during your time in the Marines. What was it like going from, special operations into the civilian world? I'm sure that was a big transition. Not only transitioning out of the military is a big transition, but that's a whole nother, a level of the military. So talk to us a little bit about that. What was it like for you during that?
It was an absolute culture shock. The military, depending on your role, I think most in general or jobs you do in the military they're just tough. The expectation is a lot higher of you as a service member than, regardless of your role, than in the civilian world. People come to work and the bar is just not there. It really depends on the company culture and the leadership and the person you work for, what type of accountability that you have over top of you. And I'd say it was a culture shock, being that the team structure isn't there, right? In the military, especially in the team life, the accountability is there every day to show up and put out just as much to the guy to your left or right. And in the civilian world, there's really not that expectation. You got hired to do a job, and it's expected that you're going to come in and kind of do that well. And you might have some KPIs that are getting checked in on once in a while, but it's not it's not the daily pressure. And so there was definitely that. But I also got out right when the COVID lockdown started. And so the stress level and the ambiguity that came with that was really high. And I mean, I'll be frank, I was having a nervous breakdown at one point. You know, I was going through a lot of mental stress, wondering what was next. And I really didn't have the option to stay in. I was dealing with some really severe medical issues. I had a full labrum tear in my hip, and it just wasn't recovering well. So I didn't think, you know, continuing to be on the teams was going to be an option anyway. So I was very committed to that. I had gotten into school, started an MBA program. There was no way I was changing direction, but every place I was talking to, whether it was Deloitte, Booz Allen, local companies, everybody was like, "We love you. You're great. We can't wait to hire you." But everything's on a hiring freeze right now. And so, I was able to navigate that and through civilian military networks that I was trying to create and maintain, I ended up finding a pretty good opportunity and made it through it. But it's tough.
So when you found that opportunity, what were getting out during COVID? I also had a similar experience. It was not easy. Was there anything that stuck out for you that worked really well for you that resulted in you getting, getting a job when you got out? Like, was it the networking? What was it specifically?
It was figuring out a plan and sticking to that, and then not choosing not to do it on my own. So I was fortunate enough to get into the Honor Foundation, which is a transition program designed for special operations veterans getting out. I think they serve all branches. And that was fantastic because whether it was LinkedIn, interviews, professional development, professional direction, really helping shape your experience, your why, that understanding, and then also connecting you with a lot of companies, organizations, interview roundtables, things like that. And I've also since been out. I've seen a lot of guys just choose to do it on their own. They think that they before they got in the military, they would call places up and put applications in online, and that's still what worked today. And it's really not. The people that are successful, transitioning well, moving up, they're staying very connected. They're always networking, they're expanding their LinkedIns, their social medias, they're constantly talking to people, and that is what I found to be most successful. Just talk to lots of people, talk about what you're doing, talk about what's not working, what is, your ideas that you have, the direction you want to go. And I just don't feel like I leave any conversation where those things are involved that I didn't take something away from somebody. And so I would just say, stay really connected, join a bunch of programs and organizations, and just try to stick with those plans that you create out of those.
That's great. That's great advice, and very, very great to practically apply that. And you proved that. It was successful for you. Can you kind of talk to us about what that first role was and your path to where you are currently?
Yeah, so through the Honor Foundation, I was connecting with different companies. One of those was National Speed. So a guy that had actually gotten out went through the Honor Foundation and was hired at National Speed, so a Wilmington-based startup, venture capitalist backed with a growth plan to expand across the U.S. Really cool company, doing really cool stuff. So it was nice to be a part of something that was, not making widgets. And, these guys were working on, I think they were one of the first companies in the U.S. to do a twin turbo setup on one of the new C8 Corvettes. So they were doing really neat projects, really cool social projects going on that they were sharing on their social medias and stuff. So it was that part was cool. But so my first boss, Will Martin, who was a Navy SEAL, went through the Honor Foundation, found this company, and just stayed connected with the Honor Foundation. So he ended up being one of the connections I made. We had a great relationship, connected really well, worked really well together, and so I worked there for about a year and a half before transitioning to another company. Again, I just think it was part of that network, continuing to grow that, and it wasn't, just as a point of advice for people as they're going through it, one, the first place you land is probably not going to be the last. And two, you just have to kind of be relentless. I mean, like when I got hired here at this role, I had to continue to follow up. Like I found out they were very interested the whole time, but they were hiring for a lot of roles. And so getting back to people was just tough, and they weren't able to keep up. But I just kind of thought it was a lack of interest, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to keep following up anyway. And I ended up getting hired, and they told me afterwards, it was like, yeah, we just couldn't even keep up with the amount of roles, the candidates. It was one person, director of HR and recruiting, all under one hat. So just keep at it, stay consistent.
That's great advice. What Tell us a little bit about your role right now. So it seems like you've made you've climbed the career ladder pretty quickly, and I know you've got a lot of interesting stuff going on right now. So tell us a little bit about one, what you're doing right now, and what's like a day or week life like for you in your current role.
Chaos. So now, right now, I'm the COO of two companies, Paradigm and AtGov. So Paradigm is a company, 34-year-old company in higher education, and we produce roughly 50% of the higher education's market of paper and digital credentials. So diplomas, certificates. We also produce diploma covers. And the other company is AtGov. That is a startup that we've been working on for a couple of years now. And uniquely, we were able to take some of the existing technologies that we have to deliver digital credentials here in Paradigm and bring those over to government to provide a solution there. And I think most people know the government is usually a little behind the power curve on technologies for good reasons. They got to be really mindful of security and constituents' information and data. But so we found a really niche opportunity there, and I could talk more about it, but that has been going extremely well. We're still pre-revenue, but that's expected to change here in Q1 of this year with a platform that we're developing for secretaries of state, competent authorities, and it's just going insanely well. So, but to do that, so a day in the life. I said chaos. It is absolutely chaos. Running companies is not easy. It's just a constant effort to keep up, to continue to solve whatever new problem that is being introduced that day. My job primarily really is to remove obstacles for people, make sure they have the resources they need. If there's bottlenecks in communication or organization or whatever it is, I'm an enabler. I have 5 directors that report to me in one company and 2 in another, and so they're the ones getting the day-to-day work done. My job is to support the CEO, the strategy, make sure that our companies are headed in the right direction, and ultimately enable all the directors to be successful on a day-to-day basis.
Amazing. So is there like much of an overlap besides you and the CEO between the two companies, or is it, it's just you two, or just you and then, the directors and then the actual, labor in each of those companies are separate?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I don't know if the role was actually envisioned this way when I came on, but what I've really found is that the CEO and I have just become true partners in all things. I mean, we spread the workload. The directors do report to me, and so I manage really that day-to-day operational aspect of things. But when it comes to strategic initiatives, partnerships, product development, engaging with the market, he and I share that as a partnership, and that has gone really well. Chris Jackson's our CEO, and by far one of the best leaders I've worked for and worked with, and seeing how he operates, being able to mentor underneath him has been a truly valuable experience for me. But yeah, we do find ourselves, especially today. I mean, with AtGov, that's been privately funded directly out of Paradigm, and that has come with a lot of challenges, a lot of financial constraints. Most companies that have an idea like this that is going to be successful are able to go out there and fundraise, venture capitalist money and bring in $100 million and build the enterprise before they go launch this. And so we have been building the plane as we're flying it, and that is tough. We're just constantly behind the power curve. I mean, I'm here on the weekend, not just to come in and chat with you, but I'm here to work, and I've been doing that for the last year, mostly 7 days a week. I'm usually here from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, sometimes a little less, but it's just required a lot, wearing a lot of hats, and not just by me. You know, there's a lot of people putting it out on the line to make sure this is all successful. But at the end of the day, it's really exciting to see these two companies are both doing really innovative, groundbreaking things that are going to change both industries, and that is very exciting. ActGov is a global solution that is going to vastly improve the operations that we're helping the secretaries of state with, and paradigms, you know, vice versa. We're doing a lot, but the big thing is a transcript platform. There's only two companies delivering transcripts in higher education, and we're planning to be the third, but we are just absolutely changing the way it's done and removing a ton of barriers in that industry. So it's really exciting.
Were there some like big shifts or trends that you guys identified in those two industries that caused you to make those decisions, or do you see any shifts or trends happening right now? Like, talk to
Mhm.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all technology right now. You know, the expectation from customers, I think in all industries really, is that we need this problem fixed. We're asking you to do it because one, you're either already our partner, or two, you're engaged with us, and we're talking, you know, whatever the original solution might be, usually changes and adjusts, like with our AgGov solution. But the expectation is that technology can solve everything right now, and that is mostly true. And so staying at the forefront of that, and being willing to address your clients' needs, that's where you find success, because it's very easy to stand back on your current business operations and say, oh, we can't do that for X, Y, or Z, and you know, to convince the company and the organization to commit the investment that's needed to bring great solutions. In a lot of ways, in a lot of companies, that's difficult. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a board of governors. You know, they're very focused on profit and the bottom line. In our company, we're privately owned by two individuals, and so we are extremely agile and able to pivot and make decisions, quick decisions on a day-to-day basis. That's one thing we constantly say is, you know, we're in meetings, and something that, you know, a blocker will come up, and somebody will say, oh, we can't do that for X, Y, or Z, or we're going to have to come back to this. There's got this X, Y, and Z needs to be figured out first. And both Chris and I will say, no, we have the 90% right now. Like, we can commit to a direction. If something you go out and find out changes that and we need to come back, we can do that. But we're going to commit to a decision right here so that everybody else can start working and we can take a step forward.
Amazing. I like that. Sounds like a lot of, you know, values and traits you had from your Marine Corps time have kind of continued to propel you to success. Do you, well, do you believe that? Do you think that there's some things that allow you to kind of thrive in the role that you are now, that you can, you know, draw a direct line to what you learned in the Marines?
Absolutely. It's, you know, I think most of it comes down to mindset. You know, most people will look at things out there in the world, whether it's becoming a doctor or flying a plane, or jumping out of one. You know, whatever it is, going out there and you know, becoming the COO of a law firm, you know, whatever it is, most people will look at that and they can't even grasp that that's something they could, should, or would do. And it was just the constant challenge and overcoming those challenges in the Marine Corps that I just think I can do anything. Today, if I wanted to go become a doctor, and I never thought about becoming a doctor, I feel totally confident going to med school, passing it, becoming a doctor. That's not an aspiration of mine. But whatever it is, I believe I can do it. And I take that with me. I lead with that mentality. And in this company, if somebody says, we can't do something, I'll say, clear the room, give me a whiteboard, and give me the 4 people in here that want to figure it out, and we're going to war game it, and we're going to figure it out, you know, and whatever that is, that's posed really well. We've solved some major challenges. I mean, business is just all problems all the time. You know, people that are out there baking cakes, or my wife's a hairstylist and wants to start a salon. I'm like, it's not doing hair. Running a business is just solving business problems all day. Um, and so I think especially people that go through a lot of adversity in the military, you come out well positioned to be very successful in a business environment, because if you can solve problems, you're going to be valuable. And it's not the people that show up and want to just turn the wheel every day. It's the people that are curious, they're asking questions. When somebody's voicing a problem, they're inquisitive, they're asking, tell me more about that. I wonder how I can help. Could I participate? And I think that's just natural in the military. Everybody kind of crowds around problems. You typically work on things as a team. Most stuff is not siloed, whereas it's naturally siloed in business. You got departments and what have you. So
Great. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great perspective, and honestly, a great eloquent way of talking about what we learn in the military and how that can be applied in a business sense. So appreciate that. KPIs, key performance indicators, what are the ones that you're focused on most directly as the COO for two companies?
So the strongest KPI, first and foremost, is honestly just taking care of yourself. When I feel good, when I feel like I'm showing up every day, my best self, I know that people that I emulate, and then people want to emulate that behavior. So that's my number one KPI. But obviously in a business, revenue, profit, that's your true indicator. But there's a lot of things that depend on that. So I track revenue, I track our sales very closely. But in a business, especially the larger the organization that you're at, change is not quick. And that's probably the biggest lesson I have learned, is that I can have a million great ideas, and I have to figure out how and when the best timing is to implement some of those ideas. Organizations are not always ready for change. So I could come up with 8 great platforms that our market wants, they say they want it, we're capable of doing. And then if I try to start all those projects on day one, our IT team or our operations, if they're impacted, whoever it is, are going to melt down, and that's going to take us down instead of bringing us up. And so, I really look at employee feedback, kind of how they're feeling, what they're saying. I mean, your people are the number one contributor to revenue, to success, and so hearing their pain points, making sure that your leaders are having regular one-on-ones, staying in touch. And then actually, doing something when they do give that feedback, because it's very easy to brush stuff under the rug. It's very easy to talk somebody out of stress and kind of convince them to just push through it, or we're going to, but actually coming up with a plan and choosing to sit down and write a new policy or change some process or, make larger changes. It's effort on top of everything else, but you have to prioritize it. And so I would say people are probably your number one KPI to make sure the company's doing well. Revenue is equally as important, but it's impacted by so many things that you really have to focus on those individual efforts.
Well said. 6 to 12 months from now, where do you want to be personally with these companies? What are your goals?
Well, right now we're actively in negotiations with about 10 states for ActGov. And so, we're expecting to launch this platform in January, and I really have to see that go well. We're opening this up to roughly 2 million customers in year one, and that's a big deal. I mean, these are people that are going to be calling our systems, and we have to address and ensure that their service is optimal. And we are representing the states in that matter as well. So we have to hold a very high level, sophisticated level of communication for their constituents, make sure we preserve those relationships really well. And then just through that chaos, really continue to maintain our roadmap, maintain all the features, and things that we need to continue to add to the platform to make sure that we're successful and we remain solid in what we're doing. And then on the paradigm side, we've been very head down drawing up these requirements for this transcript platform. And again, just to put things into perspective for that, 95% of transcripts today that are produced and sent between schools are delivered via PDF. So they're taking that PDF and they're having to manually type that data into their student information systems. So we have designed a system. We've already built the engine. Now we need to design the front and the back ends to that. This is going to allow them to transfer the actual raw data between schools. So we're building an ecosystem that's going to connect institutions, third-party agencies that are supporting transcript application, and then the students themselves. And so it is really, really innovative. It's really groundbreaking. And I really expect it to probably 4x the size of our company within a 4-year period. And at least that's our plan. So it's cool. It's a lot of exciting stuff going on. It's stressful, but it's very fulfilling.
I remember trying to get my undergrad grades to my MBA program, and it was a huge pain in the ass. So I hope you guys do solve that problem. And it sounds like you're well on the way to doing it. If you could remove one obstacle or blocker by like waving a magic wand or like snapping your fingers, like what would that be? What is the one thing that you would like to eliminate without maybe doing a whiteboard session or something like that? Tell me.
Yeah. I kind of alluded to these issues earlier, but there's a lot of change happening, and the organization is currently, in my eyes, not accepting it optimally, if that makes sense. And that really stems from not having all the people you need, not having the right positions, and maybe not even having all the right people. We have great teams, but when you choose to do things like hire the bottom end market range for the roles, you want to mentor somebody into something, you justify cost savings rather than bringing in that talent. Who you have on your team absolutely matters, and there's skill and there's will, and there's people that just come in and make an immediate impact on your organization. I've seen people that have kind of hindered us and been real blockers and not great cultural fits, and then they end up moving on, and we recalibrate, we refine that job description, we pay the right amount, and we end up bringing in somebody that just entirely changes the organization. I've seen that happen so many times. And so, just making sure that the organizations are ready to accept the change. Today, I don't feel like we are, but we are getting through it day by day, and trying to make that continual progress. So I just have the internal commitment that as the resources are there, I'm not always going to focus on profitability. I have to focus on making sure that the organization is sound. We have the right people in the right seats with the right skill sets.
Amazing. Everybody listening is definitely probably drawing some lines to what they did in the military, to what it takes to be successful in a role like yours on the civilian side of things. Now, if you were sitting across from somebody who was either thinking about getting out of the military in the next few months or year, or somebody who recently got out, what type of advice would you give them if they want to kind of emulate or follow the same path that you've taken to climbing the corporate ladder? What would that be?
Don't limit yourself. I've said that to a lot of guys. I stay involved in the Honor Foundation. I've tried to coach and mentor anytime somebody reaches out and does want to have a conversation. Guys on the team today, it surprises me, but they'll get out at 15, 16 years, and I think they're crazy for that. But I've worked through that with them, and so don't limit yourself. If somebody tells you you're just a project manager and you want to go run a company, you go run a company, because that's what I got told. You'd be a great project manager. You can go get this military provided PMP certification. I did that, but I was like, I want to own or operate a company. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't know what company or what industry, but I liked the idea of running operations, of just being maxed all the time, and that's just my personality. But that, and don't do it on your own. Just absolutely don't do it on your own. I don't, I mentioned it earlier, but every conversation I have where I'm engaged with somebody and going back and forth on ideas or issues I'm having, I always come out of that with something. Just whether it's a new idea, which is more rare, but most likely I've tweaked something I was already thinking and adjusted my plan a little bit, or it invigorated me to go jump after what I was just talking about. It lit a fire under me. They're giving me that inspiration. That sounds like a good idea. Here's what I would do, or so I would just say talk to as many people as you can. Find somebody in those roles you're interested in, doing what you're doing or the industry they're in, and just keep talking to people. The Honor Foundation put a task in front of me to have a certain number of cups of coffee. And that was, that could be a virtual meeting like this. This is a cup of coffee. And just to have conversations and ask questions and share some of what you're doing. And that was great. And I just kept that habit. If somebody reached out to me and wanted to meet, absolutely, just like in this instance. And then I find myself also like just seeing companies doing cool stuff. I'm really into robotics and AI and quantum computing, and I love talking about those things all day. And I've reached out to robotics companies because we design robotics for some of our manufacturing. And I just get on there and talk to them about what they're doing. And they're more than willing to share. And it's, these are executives at random companies that I just reached out to on LinkedIn. So, don't limit yourself. Don't be scared. Just go out there and start chasing and be consistent. You're going to fail, but that failure is part of the learning process.
Sensational advice. Jason, if anybody's interested in looking you up or looking up your companies, how can they do it?
Yeah, so paradigm-corp.com, @gov is gov-secure.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn and reach out. Like I said earlier, I'm always willing to connect, share, talk shop, and hopefully can extend some advice. But if not, if nothing comes out of that, at least I hope whatever plan you currently have gets tweaked and adjusted, or you feel inspired to go chase it a little faster.
Jason, amazing chatting with you today. Appreciate all your wisdom. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're a busy man and you're at work on a Saturday ready to get after it. So yeah, really appreciate it. And, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, likewise, Eamon. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you to our guest for sharing their journey from the military to corporate leadership. We'll be back soon with more stories of veterans proving that success doesn't end with a uniform. It begins a new mission. This is Military to Management with your host, Eamon.